Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series as I DM my group at my friendly local game store through Out of the Abyss, the 5th edition Underdark adventure. So, right at the end of last session, they had witnessed the blasphemous parody of a wedding with these bridesmaids and groomsmen, chamberlains and bridesmaids of Zuggtmoy, and then experienced the vision that showed them, Zuggtmoy getting ready to be married and, the Dread Demon Lord being outfitted in sort of a wedding gown made of fungus and all this other stuff. And the vision ended, and the sovereign, there's two sovereigns for this Myconid colony in Neverlight Grove. One of them is Basidia, who is with them. The other one is Philo. Philo is under the influence of Zuggtmoy. Basidia is not. So Basidia and also Rasharu, who is the leader of the Circle of Explorers, were there with them when this vision happened, and that was enough to convince them that, okay, time to go. So before that, the characters had been saying, hey, we just had this really nasty fight in this cursed or this awful garden with people planted in the garden, and only their heads are showing, and they're all covered in fungus, and some really bad stuff's going down. We think it's a demon lord, and the Myconids were just baffled. Like, what does this even mean? Let's go see what you're talking about. So they went there and they witnessed all this, and they were like, okay, we're getting the HE doubles hockey sticks out of here, like right now. So Basidia and Rasharu, and they were like, okay, we're getting any Myconid that wants to leave, we're going back to a nomadic existence, because their group of Myconids were nomads before they joined up with Philo's group that was already established in Neverlight Grove. The character said, "Can we go with you?" And they were like, "Yep, but we're leaving right now." So that's kind of where things were at. What would have or still remained for this chapter is, of course, this huge fungal tower. I don't know if you can see it there or not. That's just this huge mushroom tower in another cavern that's kind of connected to the Neverlight Grove main cavern. And it's this mushroom tower is so big, it's like you can't even really get it into your brain, the dimensions. It's just really, 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 really gargantuan. And one of my players was like, I want to burn that tree down. I'm like, man, this is way more than a tree. This is like really huge. And what they don't know, but what the DM knows and all that, and people who have read the book know, is that Zuggtmoy is in there. And her bridesmaids and chamberlains and other creatures under her influence are either in the tower with her or immediately surrounding the tower. So there was some discussion on the characters on what to do among the party. And before I go any further, we will talk. I'm not going to talk about this right at this moment, but we will talk about this before this video is over. One of my characters charged, well, not even charged, just attacked Zuggtmoy. I'll say it again. Unprovoked, attacked Zuggtmoy. Whoa. We'll deal with that before the video is over. Attacked Zuggtmoy. Unprovoked. Anyway, wow. And if you're wondering, was it the same player who at second level, and they're fourth level now, so a fourth level player basically unprovoked attacked Zuggtmoy. If you're wondering if it's the same player who at second level charged and wounded an adult red dragon and was immediately dispatched from this mortal coil, yep, same player. So, I actually gave him a hug at the end of the night because he keeps things interesting. So anyway, moving on. So there was a discussion among the attacked Zuggtmoy unprovoked. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure you heard me right. Whew. Okay. So there was a discussion among the party, like, what do we do? And there was some people wanted to, like, hey, we don't even know for sure if Zuggtmoy is physically in this tower. They're pretty sure that's Zuggtmoy's tower, but they don't know, is she physically in there? And they just wanted to go investigate just for the sense of exploration. And other parts of the party were like, no, we've seen enough. We know and we have enough evidence that things are really, really bad here. Let's leave with the Myconids. So they ended up committing the cardinal sin of D&D, and they split the party. And the monk and the young elf wizard, female elf wizard who plays, the player plays her purposefully kind of young and recklessly, decided to move forward and go and do some scouting on the um, tower, and the rest of the party was going back to make preparations with the um, uh, Myconids as they got ready to go. Another thing is, Rasharu made good on his promise. He said, hey, you've helped us investigate what's going on. I told you that I would serve as a guide for you in the Underdark, and I'll do that. And they all pretty much unanimously decided they want to go to Blingden Stone, which is fine with me because I think that's a great next point in this adventure, for multiple reasons. One being that it's 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 really kind of a natural next stop anyway, a major city where some stuff happens. But two, Out of the Abyss is told really in two parts. There's a part one and a part two, and there's some stuff that happens in the middle between the two parts that kind of divides it. And that's Blingden Stone is a very good place to have that middle point. So, and I think they're getting about the right level. I think about 5th level is where you want that middle point, if I remember right. So, happy about that. Without having to put them on rails or urge them to blend in stone. I dropped a couple of clues that might be where they want to go, but I didn't try to twist their arm, and they just decided to go that way. So I'm happy with that. So they went back, and there was some discussion with the Circle of Explorers, like, can Globagul come with us? And we'll get to the people who went to the tower here in a second. But what I was doing with the party or with the group was I would do a little bit with one and then swap to the other and then come back and then keep swapping back and forth. But I'll just try to kind of lay things out a little differently for the purposes of these notes in this video. Rasharu said, hey, I'll still be your guide. Basidia had said, if you help us check this stuff out, I'll give you some treasure. And he did. He made good on that. And there's some treasure Basidia basically tells them where they can find some treasure that's buried. He's like, hey, I got to get everybody ready to go, but here's where the stuff's at. He tells them where to go dig the stuff up. There's a box that has some gems in it and that are worth various gold pieces. And one of the chaotic neutral character from last session, it's a Tiefling Ranger, like, had, last time just kind of grabbed the holy symbol out of the poor unfortunate female drow's hand that was dying in the garden. And this time she was like, I'll just hold on to that box, and so she's playing very, very mercenary, very greedy. And, the rest of the party's like, okay, well, but we know you have the box. Okay. So there's some, and it's not tense among the real people, but, it's making for fun role play, among the group, among interesting party dynamic. Now, it says in the book, it says if the characters kill the Grick Alpha, the Umber Hulk, or the Shambling Mound in the Fungal Wilds, that was stuff they were asked to do by the Circle of Hunters. At least I know that the Shambling Mound and the Grick Alpha were. And bring the carcasses to Basidia, the Sovereign rewards each character with a potion of greater healing stored in a hollow gourd-like mushroom. I just went ahead and gave them that stuff because they've done such a boon, by revealing everything that's going on, that I just decided, I said, how many people's in the party? And we counted, I think right now we have 7. And I was like, okay, well, you find 7, potions. And I think I went ahead and told them they were of greater healing. Sometimes, and there was some discussion too. It's like, hey, we got these new magic items. do we take a short rest, long rest? Do we do identify spell? Can we make an arcane check? So we were, figuring out how to identify stuff in 5th edition. And in 5th edition on short rest or long rest, it makes it, pretty standard to be able to figure out what stuff is, and you have to attune to it and everything. Well, there's some scrolls. Basidia had given them a scroll of protection against fiends when he first asked them to do this favor, like find out what's going on around here, and he gave them this moldy scroll case. And inside of it, they were trying to figure out what the scroll is. And they were like, I'm like, well, does identifying a scroll work the same as any other magic item? I don't think I've really looked into that with 5th edition. So we looked it up, and in the Dungeon Master's Guide, it gives rules for identifying and this and that and the other. And then it lists scrolls as a class of magical item. So it's like, it says magical items, and then it has these sub-paragraphs, armor, weapons, wands, rings, scrolls. So taking all that, I just said, well, identifying a scroll is pretty much the same as any other magic item. And unless I find or read otherwise or hear otherwise, that's how I'm going to do it for the time being. Now, I will say that I might be a little bit looser with scrolls, that if somebody has a really amazing arcana check or arcane check, they might be able to figure it out. Or if they already know the spell, obviously they can tell what the spell, but this spell of protection against fiends, the magic user, wizard, whatever that we have in the group doesn't know that. There's a warlock and a wizard, and I don't think either of them know protection against fiends. So nice little side note there. But yeah, they were in Philo by the book. The Myconids that are under the influence of Zuggtmoy do not prevent the Myconids that want to leave from leaving. They're just like, okay, this is about to get amazing and joyful, and the great cedar and all this stuff. But hey, if you want to leave. But if you stick around, it's going to be great. So they're just so la la la, under the influence of Zuggtmoy, and Myconids by default are not, really hostile to each other or anything like that. They more like, hey, let's meld and get along and all this stuff. So Philo's like, all right, cool, go, you can go. So there's no, I guess if you wanted to DM a confrontation just to make things, more interesting or whatever, I think things are already tense and interesting enough in Neverlight Grove, especially, with what I'm about to share. But, if that's what you prefer, you could make it tense or have some sort of battle to the finish or something between Basidia and Philo. But I just said, hey, Philo's cool. Whoever wants to go. And I just said basically like half the colony is going to leave, which, by the numbers, I think there's like 150 Myconids. 150 Myconids and Spore Servants. Now, I haven't talked about the Spore Servants a lot. I've mentioned them during battles and when the bad guys are around, but, Myconids do have Spore Servants, like creatures and monsters and humanoids that have been taken over, and they're almost like little zombies that serve them, even though they're not evil, right? Myconids are not evil. This is almost more like a natural process. So there's 150 Myconids. I just split it down half and said, 75 Myconids are going with you. There were some questions about Sprout. What about Sprout? And, one of my players was like, we've delivered Sprout. Sprout, I don't want to keep up with Sprout anymore. But some other people are like, I want to know what's going on with Sprout. Is Sprout staying? Is Sprout leaving? Because they built up this bond with Sprout for several months now. The Myconid, little kiddo, 5-year-old Myconid they've been carrying around with them. They finally delivered here. Well, I did role play that Sprout was part of the group that was leaving. So if you wanted to add a wrinkle and maybe have some more drama and tension, maybe you could have the group discover that Sprout is not allowed to leave and they decide to rescue Sprout. I mean, there's different ways to go with that. Or not Sprout, Stool. My bad, Stool is the little Sprout that they've traveled with. So I just said, hey, he's with you, because I wanted to have all the tension and drama and everything over on the tower. Everything, in the main Neverlight Grove area was just, we're getting out of here. We're getting ready to go. The other thing they had to figure out is what about Globagool, the sentient gelatinous cube. And by the way, one of my players is convinced that that because I've mentioned that, hey, there's eyes in Globagool now, but because the artwork in the book shows that Globagool has eyes. So when I first described Globagool, I didn't mention any eyes. And then later I said, oh, now you notice that he's got eyes. They've kind of formed. And so I accidentally created this sort of rabbit hole red herring for one of my players that, maybe that there's a being that is regenerating inside of Globagool. Maybe even like a demon lord or something. So I've told a couple of the players outright, no, that's not what's going on, but I don't think he heard that, and I'm kind of enjoying watching him. There's Globagool with the eyes. So I accidentally created a red herring for one of my players, but it shows the critical thinking and the trying to think through things based on clues that they get that players will do. They'll go off on tangents you can't possibly imagine. And then other stuff that you've basically laid out with neon arrows pointing at it, they'll just blow right past it. So you just never know what a player is going to do. Uh, but it was determined that the Circle of Explorers was fine, because the Circle of Explorers is pretty much with Rasharu, who's cool to go, and they're much more comfortable just splitting and exploring and getting out of the cavern anyway. So they're all pretty much going. None of them are staying. And they're fine, like, with Globagool kind of traveling with their, with them kind of keeping an eye on Globagool. There was some, one thing I pointed out, I said when you go out and travel in the Underdark, remember, Globagool only has a 15 feet per round movement or whatever. And they're like, oh, what do we do? Well, I said, well, hold on. And I'm glad I thought to do this. I went and I busted out the monster manual and I looked at the Myconid's movement rates. And a regular adult Myconid moves at 20 feet per round. And a sprout, like Stool is, little baby Myconid, little child Myconid, moves at 10 feet per round. And a sovereign Myconids, and sovereigns are the biggest ones. Basically, you become a sovereign, you become a leader among the Myconids by just being the biggest. That's just how, you're the biggest, you're the leader. So they move at 30 feet per round. So we kind of said, well, look, you've got the average adult Myconid moves at 20 feet, and then you've got the Myconid youngins that move at 10, and then in the middle you've got Globagool at 15. I'm thinking they're kind of this big of a crew of Myconids is going to move at an average rate of about 15, 10 or 15. And maybe some of them are carrying sprouts, or maybe they're just moving at 10 feet per whatever. So I determined that having Globagool come along would really not slow things down. So another thing I determined, which came into it later, is for most encounters while they're with the Myconids, if there's combat or narrative encounters, the players are going to deal with it. Now, the Sovereign or some of the leaders of circles might get involved, but they're not going to, every encounter, they're not going to point at 75 Myconids and go attack. They're not going to have this big Myconid, machine gun train that just handles all their situations for them. And we discussed that a little bit because there is an encounter at the very end of this session that they had to deal with. And they're like, yeah, that makes total sense. So sometimes I tell the players outright why I've made a narrative decision or a decision. Sometimes I don't. But on that one, I just, I said, look, guys, I mean, if you have 75 NPCs with you, I mean, combat-wise, you're just going to wipe out pretty much anything you run into, unless it's like a demon lord or a dragon or something. I don't know if I said those examples, but the point is that, the players are going to carry their own weight in, combat and narrative encounters, unless it's some special, unique situation that the Myconids need to be involved in. So, but yeah, they're, for the time being, when they left Neverlight Grove, they're traveling in this big, nomad group with the Myconids. Okay, so I think that's everything on when the party split. So going back to the other two characters, they kept getting closer and closer to Yigmorgus, which is the huge tower, mushroom tower, and this is just really disgusting. It's like disgusting Lovecraftian. Uh, the players almost wondered, are we on a different plane of existence here? And I said, no, you're not. But it's very gross and disgusting. There's just fungus everywhere. Uh, and then there's eerie luminescence pouring out of this fungus tower. Um, the and this whole, as you leave where the Garden of Welcome was at, would the incredibly inappropriately named the Garden of Horror is what it really is. You go down into this basin, and there's a carpet of moss and fungi, scores of variously sized lumps, pockmarked where pools of vile fluid separate news, some drying out and some scabbing over. The entire area, this ledge that they're descending down, is difficult terrain. And if you get just this close to Yigmorgus, you've got to make a DC 11 Wisdom saving throw or gain 1 level of madness. Now, just so you know, both of my players that ventured this close and ultimately to the tower made 3 or 4 different wisdom saving throws. I think at least 3. And all of them made it. They didn't get any level of madness, which kind of blows me away because it goes from an 11. Then later they have one at a 13. And then later they have one at a 15. And I think I gave the player that was heading back, not players, the player that was heading back to the group after the events at the tower, I think I gave them another DC 11 one just because they had to cross back through all that and made all of them. They didn't fail any of these. That's pretty impressive. And my group is not the type to fudge dice rolls. It's possible that they've slipped something past on me or whatever just by as many people as we've had come in and leave. We probably had 20 different people over time cycle in and out of this group because it's at a game store, although we have a good solid crew that's been there the whole time. So I'm sure that somebody slipped a roll in on me or something like that. But, this group is, I think, pretty honest with the rolls. So I wasn't suspicious of that at all. I was like, well, sometimes the dice break your way. They see these big, these lumps are moving. There's stuff. There's humanoids in there. There's Nothics. There's giant spiders and these big blistering lumps that are moving around all across this landscape. And there's just fungus and nastiness and vile fluids separating and oozing. And they actually witnessed one of these lumps burst open, and I described it on purpose. I said it's like a giant zit. It's like a giant pimple just bursting open. It's just disgusting. And I used that imagery on purpose because I wanted that repellent feeling. And there's this and what's left inside the pockmark behind is this male drow. Like, he's just screaming and he's in agony, and then his eyes roll back in his head, and he just kind of, in a euphoria, sinks back down in, and this tower kind of shudders in pleasure when that happens. And that's when that's when another madness saving throw happens. The first one was just when they start heading to the area and kind of get into this terrain. And then throughout, while this drow is screaming, you got loud moans and cries of agony answer his screams in terrifying, deafening chorus. It's just disgusting, but he eventually, kind of goes into this horrible euphoria and just sinks back down in as the fungus completely takes him over. Whew. So it's just nasty. This Neverlight Grove is awful. Which is weird because when you first get there, it almost feels like you're in the Underdark version of Rivendell, and then it's just awful, Lovecraftian, nasty, Demon Lord madness. So they kept going. Should we keep going? Should we not? Should we keep going? Should we not? They were getting more and more nervous the closer they got to the tower, as they should. That means that Chris Perkins and the other folks that wrote this adventure did a great job with that. Okay, so they finally get to the tower, and I'll try to kind of speed this up because we're already at 25 minutes. And there's all these creatures just under the influence of Zuggtmoy that are just dancing around the tower. And that drow they saw that joins at a certain point, and that's yet another madness saving throw. It kind of rises up out of the ground and joins um, the dance. But there's humanoids that have been taken over by fungus. There's plants and fungus that are kind of twisted into humanoid shapes. There's there's hook horrors, there's spore servants, and they're just covered by tumors and cankers and putrid patches of flesh. It's just disgusting, but they're all dancing around this tower. And then if they hear um, they can hear people talking, cackling and chatting amiably about Sovereign Philo's success at bringing so many new guests to attend the party. Now, it specifically says that if they don't interfere with these dancers, nothing happens. There's no fight. But if they do interfere, they get into a fight with 1d6 Drow Spore Servants and 1d6 Hook Horror Spore Servants. Now, the two players that had committed the cardinal sin of splitting the party said, hey, we're not going to mess with it. We're just going to keep going. I think they were about to leave. They're like, okay, we've seen enough. And one of them said, is there an entrance to the tower? And I said, why, yes, you see a clear entrance to the tower. It doesn't really mention an entrance here, but since it describes the interior, it seems to me that it's pretty obvious there's an entrance in and out. So I just said there's an entrance. Maybe I missed the part where it said there's an entrance. And there's no map for this tower on the inside. They just describe it. It's just a big round open area that goes up and up and up. So the characters see Drow dancing as if their bones are melting, Duergar roaring with mock merriment and vomiting slime, and even Nothics laughing mildly as they leap and caper. It's just disgusting, this whole dance. And if they observe long enough, then they see the Drow that they saw earlier comes out of the ground and joins the dance. It's just gross. So anyway, so they finally, when they said there's an entrance, they're like, okay. So they went in. And the Great Palace, they go in, and what they see, if they go in, is yes, they come face to face with Zuggtmoy. But Zuggtmoy is, she's sort of floating, surrounded by spiraling balconies. And on these spiraling balconies, a growing number of these bridesmaid creatures that we described last video, they attend her singing as they weave her bridal gown to prepare for the fateful wedding day. And this is what they saw in their vision. So if they enter, the characters come face to face with Zuggtmoy. And she's attended by 12 bridesmaids of Zuggtmoy. Fortunately for them, Zuggtmoy is deep in meditation as her gown and veil are being prepared. She doesn't move, although she can speak and use her other abilities. Her bridesmaids attempt to chase off intruders, wailing and scolding them about how it is unlucky for them to see the bride before it is time. If the characters don't withdraw immediately, Zuggtmoy awakens and uses her mind control spores ability to send them away, using her infestation spores only if the characters insist on engaging the demon lord here and now. Dozens of spore servants and Myconids respond to Zuggtmoy's telepathic call if their mistress is in danger, attacking the characters heedless of their own safety. Okay, let me read this on a little part here. Any attack that successfully deals damage to Zuggtmoy damages her gown, driving the demon queen into a rage to attack the intruders. Pay attention to that last statement. Okay, so this encounter is set up purposefully by the designers, by Chris Perkins and the other folks at D&D. Wizards of the Coast, to let them experience, oh my goodness, it's a demon lord, but let them survive. This is not really set up for an encounter of combat. You get, there's multiple safety gates, if you will. One, the bridesmaids are like, leave, leave, leave. This is unlucky for you. Leave. It's unlucky. You can't see the bride, the bride's on her, so what does it say? How is it unlucky for them to see the bride before it is time? Leave. They're not even attacking. They're saying, go, 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 scolding them. Get out, get out. And then if they stick around and don't heed that warning, then Zuggtmoy just hits them with mind control spores to send them away. Just be gone. I don't even feel like dealing with just be gone. I got more important stuff going on. I was going to, if they had done that, I was going to use the mind control spores, and then they just go leave, and then they end up cruising back to the main part of Neverlight Grove and saying, hey guys, we got to leave. and out they go. And then 24 hours later, they're no longer under the control. But as long as they're, leaving, they're following what they were told to do. So what happened was when they saw Zuggtmoy floating there and all the bridesmaids attending her and the other bride, get away, get away, get away. They both went, okay, we've seen enough, time to go. And I'm like, cool, we're good. Nobody's gonna die. And we have this thing called the Dread Beagle of Doom. I'll try to post a picture of it in here on the video. But the Dread Beagle of Doom is a little miniature that appears, and it's an old in joke for our party. But anytime it's possible that there might be a lot of death, usually on the party's side, the Dread Beagle of Doom will, no matter where they're at, whether they're underground or in space or in the water or in the forest or in a tavern somewhere, doesn't matter where you're at, off in the distance, in the full moon, on a misty rolling moor, on top of a moor, under the moon in the mist, you'll see the Dread Beagle of Doom. Ow. And let's just say that this next action that a character took or player took caused the Dread Beagle of Doom to appear. And ow, ow, his sad howl, but somewhat eager howl. There's also the Dread Cat of Apathy, the Dread Kitten of Apathy. That appears sometimes too, but usually it's the Dread Beagle of Doom. Like I said, I'll try to find a picture. So they're like, hey, let's get out of here. I'm like, all right, and I'm going to let them leave, whatever. And then we kind of start joking around. Like one of the characters said something like, oh, we should say something like, greetings from, Demogorgon, sends his regards or something like that. And because I think they had talked briefly about, do we try to instigate a fight between Zuggtmoy and Demogorgon? So then I joked around. I had this vision in my head of like these old mob movies where it's like, pardon me, it's like the guy goes into the other mob boss's restaurant or his nightclub or whatever, and is like, Boss Maroney sends his regards, and is like shooting the place up or throwing Molotov cocktails or something like that. And we kind of joked around on that. And then the player went, oh, I'm totally going to do that. And we were like, what? It's like, no, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to start a fight between, and we were like, dude, we're joking. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not influencing you. The other player was like, I'm running. As soon as he heard this, because this guy's prepping a fire spell. I can't remember which one he ended up using. I think it was like maybe a cantrip, firebolt or whatever. So the monk is like, when he hears this, he's like, I'm running. And so the other player, and we're like, dude. And he's like, no, I'm totally doing that. I'm just gonna throw a fire. I'm just gonna throw a firebolt and shout, Demogorgon sends his regards, and then I'm gonna run. And I'm like, oh man. And so this character player really wanted to do this. Wow. So I actually went. I have this big at the game store. I've got a big statue of Bellefoss that I got from Sword Coast Legends, the video game. They made these limited edition statues of Bellefoss. So I went and grabbed that thing. I'll try to put a picture of it up. Dropped it on the map. It's huge, and put the female elf wizard's miniature right next to it. And I said, this doesn't represent the actual size of Zuggtmoy. Zuggtmoy is only large. A lot of the demon lords are huge or gargantuan. Zuggtmoy is large, right? So just, kind of a big towering humanoid, best I can tell from the stats in the book. But I said, this represents the threat level you're dealing with here. Anyway, yeah, so he blasted her and rolled well enough to hit and do damage. Same thing with that dragon that time. Happened to hit, happened to do damage. The dragon's like, I gotta kill you. So And I said, look, I said, any attack that successfully deals damage to Zuggtmoy damages her down, driving the demon rain into a rage, demon queen into a rage that to attack the intruders. So I said, okay, man. I gave him one out, and I told him before. I said I intervened after the paladin died on another situation. I think in the Whirlstone tunnels, I kind of intervened and gave him a chance to live. I said, I'm not going to intervene anymore. I'm not going to do any direct DM interventions on this stuff. But what I did do is I said, look, I'll give you a 50% chance. I said, roll percentile dice and, tell me is it low or high. But, the odds are 50%. And the way he rolled, he didn't do it. He didn't beat the 50% odds because I was going to rule that, like maybe you singed Zuggtmoy a little bit, but didn't damage the gown, and there wasn't, it says like, just be gone and use the mind control spores. But no, the way it rolled, I gave him a chance, 50-50 chance, 1 out of 2 chance, damaged the gown. So basically, she dropped down. They went into combat initiative, and the other dude split. He's like, I'm out of here. So I let him go. He's just gone. But the other character, I tried to do a little bit of role play on the Demogorgon thing. I was thinking maybe I can pull something out here to, narratively make sense why the character is not going to die. What I was thinking about trying to do was have Zuggtmoy hit her a couple of times because she's going to run. She's like, I got to get out of here. And say, take that message back to Demogorgon, and I was going to say these attacks that that Zuggtmoy did to you, even though, you've healed up your hit points, there's always scars and marks there from those because there's like little pseudopods that pop out and hit. So that's narratively, I was trying to think of a way of having the character live through this. And what I had ruled was that, if she makes it back out of the entrance and outside of the tower and splits before Zuggtmoy kills her, then Zuggtmoy will just, because I'm more interested in getting married and all this, and I know where to find you, and send that message to Demogorgon. Now, one thing that did happen in the exchange, Zuggtmoy said, "What did you say?" And the character was like, Demogorgon sends his regards, and I said, well, give me a persuasion check. And rolled well enough to convince Zuggtmoy, yes, that's what's happening, is Demogorgon has sent this character. So they did kind of set in motion maybe a rivalry between Zuggtmoy and Demogorgon. So basically, by the rolls, a couple of pseudopod hits went out and dropped this character to 0 hit points before they had a chance to make it out the entrance. I said, okay. I said, I'm not saying you're dead or that you're alive, but your character's gone, and I need you to hand me the character sheet. He's like, oh, okay. So he hands me the character sheet. Now, the reason I asked for the character sheet, I'm going to make a copy of it, and I'm going to give it back, the main one, back to the player. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. And if any of my players are watching this, I've asked you to stay several episodes behind. I'd really rather you not watch these at all because I do occasionally give hints, but you're going to be adults, you're going to do what you're going to do. But definitely don't listen to any of this. Don't spoil it for yourself. Don't spoil it for your other party members by not being surprised if something happens. Even if you don't go tell them what you heard, you need to be genuinely surprised. I'm more than likely going to have this character because there's all these mind control spores going on, and they were dropped to 0 hit points. They weren't killed. Just Zuggtmoy is going to keep this character under mind control, and then this character will reappear more than likely. Now, I may just leave the character dead, but there's a very good chance this character is going to reappear at a very opportune and dramatic moment under the control of Zuggtmoy, especially if it's in this mix between Zuggtmoy and Demogorgon. So it's possible. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. Is that it? Where the cat is both dead and alive at the same time in the box. This character is both dead and alive at the same time. I haven't quite figured out narratively which way I'm going to go. But attacked, 4th level character, attacked Zuggtmoy unprovoked. Whoa. Wow. Anyway, exciting times. So this other character made it back, did one more madness check, passed that one, made it back, and they're gone. So they're out heading towards Blingden Stone, and they've decided that the Myconid colony doesn't know if they're going to go all the way to Blingden Stone, but they're kind of heading that direction. It's as good of a direction as any. And if they have split off from heading towards Blending Stone at any point, then Rasharu will just keep taking them towards Blending Stone. I did have, just because uh, when the party got split, uh, I had, and the two players that went to the tower got all the incredibly great encounters. I had them travel a couple of days with the Myconids, and then I had them doing an encounter. One of the set encounters is you encounter some orcs and an eye of something. I can't remember the name of it. It's kind of a higher orc that has exchanged its eye and has become sort of a warrior for its deity, eye of something. I can't remember off the top of my head. I had them do a encounter with them. Very hungry, desperate party of orcs that had been trapped in. They were so desperate. They were like, you got to pay a toll to get by here. Well, they had a decent fight. The characters had a decent. Again, the Myconids didn't get involved, and they basically beat them. And then they ended up. That's my cat scratching. Are you scratching to add dramatic tension to this battle scene? But anyway, I don't know if you could hear my cat scratching or not. Cat scratch fever. Okay, sorry, tangent. So anyway, they beat the orcs, and the orcs ended up about halfway through begging for mercy. And I did that one because I thought it'd be interesting to do that instead of just, okay, you wipe out the orcs. Now I gave them XP for all the orcs because they defeated them. But the other thing I had they were so hungry and so desperate that they were like, really what the orcs are going to do is they're going to take their fallen brethren and go eat them. But they were like, can we take the bodies so that we can give them a proper burial, and kind of played it up for laughs a little bit. But I did that also because we were getting towards the end of the night. We'd started a little bit late and I was trying to wrap things up. So that's pretty much what happened on this session. We'll probably have one session. Next session will be a session of travel and role play and encounters in the Underdark. And then we'll probably get to Blingden Stone on the session after that is probably what's going to happen. I may do one of the set encounters in the middle. There's some other set encounters like the where they met Globagul, the fungal temple. I can't remember. Oozing Temple, I think was the name of it. But I'll probably just have some role playing, a couple of like a terrain encounter and a combat encounter, and just do some of the Underdark because we haven't done that in a while, and then get into Blingden Stone. So thanks so much for watching. I appreciate your comments if you have them and questions. I appreciate everybody who watches this. People seem to really enjoy these notes, so I hope you're getting benefit out of them. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. And, we will catch you next time on Shane Place. Thanks so much.